he did.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello. So we're making fun of saying hello because we also are going to be doing a podcast with this. So we've got our vocal recording right now by a hidden microphone, and we will have that available to anyone to listen to when?
Well, by later tonight.
Immediately following the program.
I don't know about immediately.
Because there will be no editing that needs to take place at all.
Yes, so I don't know if everybody can listen, because a lot of people are probably at work or whatever, and you're probably on a break.
Right.
So, but you may not be able to have your sound up. So later you're going to be able to download the podcast, like Jenny said, and then listen to our lovely voices in your car and learn all about real estate. So, so today, what are we talking about, kids?
Jenny?
TJ? Wayne?
We're talking about the folks that are involved in the real estate process and who pays for what.
Yes. How? Sorry.
There's been a lot of people and a lot of different things that need to get paid for.
And questions are always asked about how does that get paid for? As the buyer, what do I have to pay for? As the seller, what do I have to pay for? What expenses are there? So we thought, we would break that all out for everybody. And so we can go ahead and start. But first, let's say cheers. Because, it's Wine Wednesday.
Cheers.
Ooh.
Cheers, everybody.
Everybody.
Put your glasses to...
What's everybody drinking today?
Oh, I did it again.
Oh, yeah.
How many weeks have we done this and I still haven't...
We've been doing this a couple months now.
Yeah.
we still do it. I actually had mine down, but so.
Anyways, so, alright, so we'll go ahead and start. So obviously the first person is pretty obvious, right? You've got to have a buyer.
Right.
And so the buyer is also represented by a buyer's agent. So, so who, in the course of this, who's paying for the buyer's agent?
Well, the seller's agent is paying for the buyer's agent.
Yeah, most times, and that's, I think, in most cases, the seller, with their contract with their seller, the seller's agent with their seller's contract, has provided in their commission to be shared between the buyer and buyer's agent. So most of the time the buyer, gets representation and doesn't have to contribute towards that. So there are occasionally fees charged by some brokerages and some other things that may come up. But your agent, if you're the buyer, should have that discussion with you in the very beginning, so that you understand what you're getting into. So, and just ask the question. Just to be on the safe side, always ask the question. I think is a key theme with all of the topics that we talk about. If you have questions or concerns, something pops in your mind, just ask the question. So,
let's have that conversation.
That's right. Hashtag.
Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yes, absolutely.
So, on the topic of buyers, what else? There's a lot that a buyer has to do, and there is some out-of-pocket expense that goes in there. How should we do this? Should we talk about with the buyer and out-of-expense first, or should we talk about the commission, how that breaks out, and where that goes?
Let's go through our list of people.
Okay.
And then some of these, throughout the course of in the end, each of the people who we're going to talk about today is going to have to be paid, and so let's go through the list of people, I think.
Okay.
And then that list of people, in the course of that, you'll learn who's going to pay for it, and how much that costs, and if it's a closing cost or an upfront cost. So
perfect.
So now next on the list is our seller. So we talked about that a little bit, Jenny, but why don't you talk about who's paying the seller's agent and how all that works? So.
Well, the seller pays the seller's agent, and that is the big question always on listing appointments: is what's the commission rate? What are you charging for commission? So, with that being said, the commission gets typically broken in half, or a portion of it will go to the buyer's agent, as we just stated, and then the other portion would go to the seller's agent.
Yes.
So.
And similarly to the buyer, you have a contract that's all spelled out. So in the course of signing that, ask your questions. If you're the seller, read the contract, understand what you're committing yourself to. But usually there's a percent of the sales price that is the commission you pay, and again sometimes there's fees. So but read the contract. I mean, every document you send, you should take some time to read it. So,
Always.
yes, because otherwise you'll get later and you're like, oh, I didn't know this. Well,
It's in the contract.
yeah.
It's usually what
And
we
we'll
would
walk,
respond.
yeah, and here we usually walk people through as much as we can, but a lot of times stuff's done electronically these days. So when you're signing stuff, you're not sitting with us in a room all the time. And we've had this conversation internally. Is a lot of times I'll send the contract or something to someone, and within 15 seconds I get the notification that they've already signed it, so I know they didn't read it.
Right.
So, sometimes that's just the easy way, and sometimes you can get yourself in trouble doing that. So just be careful with what you sign and read it. So.
And a listing appointment is different than when someone's coming into your house to try to sell you something. If you've ever tried to buy a product and you get a salesperson who comes into your house, they'll say, oh, if you sign now, it's at this price, and they try to pressure you. That's not the type of situation we have. We're not door-to-door salespeople. And I think a lot of people are intimidated by that, and they think that they have to rush through, or that, we're going to give them one deal now and there's another deal if we walk away. That's not what a real estate transaction is.
Right.
Right.
So, beyond, the agents and the buyers and sellers, there's a lot of other people in the transaction. And one of the first ones that a buyer will encounter is obviously your lender.
Right.
So a lender's going to get paid in a number of different ways. So let's talk a little bit about the lender and what they're getting paid and by whom.
Yes.
So let's talk about that a little
Okay.
bit. And we've got lenders probably on, so
Yeah.
chime in if you want.
So any feedback to give,
Yes.
feel free. Type away.
We're
Don't call
watching.
though, we're not going to answer.
Yes.
No.
Please don't call.
Or email, but that's not going to come up either.
Yeah.
Because we're all watching on our phones as
Right.
well. So lender typically is going to be, what are the closing costs? Everyone's question is the closing costs. Well, it costs money to borrow money, so that's where your lender is going to get paid in those fees. All lenders, banks charge different fees, and typically it's suggested to talk to more than one.
Yes.
So, because as stated, everyone has different fees, different programs, so.
And depending upon the fee or the program and the bank, like Jenny said, it can widely vary. I mean, it's sometimes a lender has a program, and if someone really wants to do it, they'll do it, but they're going to charge higher fees because that's not in the programs that they really want to be doing. So
Right.
they'll charge you a higher fee up front. So, but in any case, these things are all part of your closing costs usually. Now there are some things they'll collect up front, and we're going to talk about one of them here in just a second. But in any case, most of your fees from the lender are going to be paid at closing.
Right.
And so, people will ask us as your agent, well, what are my closing costs? Well, we can give you some sort of estimate, but they're not going to include the lender's fees because we have no way of knowing
Right.
the lender's fees. So your best estimate of closing costs is going to come from your lender. So the biggest suggestion there I have, and correct me if you have something else, but talk to the lender about what your closing costs are going to be and find out what they are. And then, like Jenny said, talk to, I would talk to at least 2 or 3,
Yeah.
and then set the proposals or the estimates that you get side by side and decide what works best for you. And I actually just got off the phone with a client 15 minutes ago who's going through this very situation. So, he's doing it in a very smart way because why pay more than you need to? And obviously service comes into it, and the actual institution that you're lending, it's not just numbers always.
Right.
So sometimes it's better to pay a little bit more, and sometimes it works out better just to take the cheapest one. So. Anything to add, TJ, to that?
No, I think in addition to that, though, you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the lender that you're dealing with, because this person is either going to be able to speed up or, in some cases, not deal with issues that could come up. So you want to be able to have a comfortable working relationship with that lender. It's a business transaction, But I really think that you want someone who can go to bat for you and help move things along if they're stalling, and who will be responsive and answer your questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's not included in the fees, so.
No.
So it doesn't matter. I think to that point, you are in those conversations with people and don't just base your decision on what the fees are. Sometimes that may be what you're gonna base your decision on, but I personally would most want someone who is going to be customer service oriented or do the best that I felt they would for me, so I may not mind paying more for that.
Right.
Um,
And as your agent, we've had experience with quite a few different lenders, and
Yes.
and this was also part of the conversation I just had with my client, is that, one of the lenders that, he's working with, I've had some less than positive experiences with other clients. So, again, if it's the numbers that matters most to you, then, we can sometimes work through those other issues.
Right.
One of the biggest things that's gonna come into play with the lender is the underwriter. So, you've got your loan originator, these are people not on our slides here, but they're people behind the scenes, with your lender. So you've got your loan originator, which is the person that you're working with directly,
Right.
but then you've also got, within the bank, there's gonna be a loan processor who's gonna be the one processing all of the documents, asking you for additional documentation as needed. And then there's also going to be the final underwriter. And the underwriter is going to be the one that gives the final yes or the final no on your loan. So we talk about sometimes with underwriters in-house versus, underwriters that are somewhere else. And sometimes, depending upon the bank, their underwriter can be sitting at a desk right around the corner, from that person. And I like to suggest with my clients that, that we use those kinds of banks, because when the rubber meets the road, your loan originator has nothing to do, with the final decision that's made. But if they can have open conversations with the underwriter to clarify issues that crop up during the course of this, then they can help make this go a little bit smoother, where if that originator is sitting in a different city, a different state, or even potentially in a different country, certainly makes that process a lot harder, because that underwriter doesn't know your loan originator from anyone. And if they know each other, have a good working relationship, and trust each other, then I think it makes for a better transaction, in most cases. So,
And again, not included in the fees, so.
Right.
I think we could talk all day long about that
yeah.
part of the transaction for sure, and we should probably have a Wine Wednesday regarding that. I think we've covered that in various
Facets.
well, we've always touched on that in pretty much every one of these that we've done, and I think maybe that would be a good one. Just
Yep. So this leads into the next part of the lending process,
Lending,
and inside of it is our appraiser. So, TJ, why don't you talk a little bit about, what the appraiser...
no, it doesn't.
Oh!
No, it doesn't.
We're gonna skip, come back, let's come back to inspector.
Okay.
While we're on lending, let's talk about the appraiser. We'll come back to...
There it is.
We'll come back to
Yeah.
the inspector, because I think it's a better segue. So the appraiser, TJ.
So the appraiser is not working for either the buyer or the seller. They're working for the bank, because the bank is only going to lend up to the value of the home as identified by the appraiser at that snapshot in time. It basically is a way to secure the bank's interest, because if you were to default on your loan, the bank needs to know how much they can sell the house for and recoup their investment. The appraiser is one of the most important people in making sure that you can get to the closing table, because if that appraisal comes back low, then you're stuck either bringing money to closing, negotiating with the seller, splitting the difference. It opens up a whole new can of worms.
And this is an out-of-pocket cost. This is how this ties into this topic. So this is going to be a cost that you have to pay up front. do you pay it to the lender or do you pay it to the appraisal company? Because what happens,
Usually paid to the lender.
yeah, it used to be that the appraiser was hired directly by the lender, and that is just not the case anymore because of federal regulations due to the market crash, and now it's hired by a third party,
Right.
or it's a third party hired to do the job, and there's no contact with the lender and the appraiser or the agents typically and the appraiser. It's usually someone separate, but that is how that is a fee paid by the buyer, so expect to have that fee as out-of-pocket cash or check, credit card. But that's going to be something that the buyer pays.
Yes.
And you should talk to your lender and find out what that fee is going to be so that you're ready to pay that when the time comes. Because
right.
if you don't pay it on time, it's going to delay your appraisal
Right.
and delay the entire process.
Yeah, and you don't want delays, so.
And I find typically the fee is right around $300.
Yeah.
It can range anywhere from I think $250 up to $450. Again, depending upon your lender, and that is part of your closing costs and part of what they'll estimate when they give you your good faith disclosure or whatever they call it these days. So, in the beginning part of the lending process. So, like Jenny said, you will pay it up front. So have that cash, in hand and ready to I guess fork it over. Now you are paying for it, so you will get a copy of the appraisal. The seller does
That's
not
your
get a
seller.
copy of
Right.
it. That is your appraisal.
And the interesting thing with this, because I've had this come up in transactions, is the seller doesn't, as Wayne said, receive that. You own that, and the seller doesn't really have a right to that either.
You can say that you give permission to let them see it or tell them the
Right.
value, but you don't have an obligation.
And you don't have to let the seller know what the value was. I mean, obviously, you will let them know if it comes in at value or less than, or, if it comes in above, they don't need to know that. They don't have to know that. So sellers out there, just know that you don't have the right to that information, and if the buyer doesn't want to give it to you,
We'll ask.
Yeah.
we'll just find out if it's good or not, so.
You can ask for anything.
Yeah, but I've had that come up where sellers think that they have the right to that and they just don't and couldn't understand why.
Right.
So you want to go back to the other out-of-pocket cost that is upfront and usually pretty immediate.
Oops.
And you need
Oops.
to, there it is, inspectors. Inspectors are hired by the buyers, and that's going to be another cost. And usually that's about the same, $300 to $400 to $500, depending on what you want to throw into that inspection. Radon, if you need.
A pest inspection,
Right.
well test, septic test, and there's timing with those too.
There's a whole slew of tests.
And when your inspector sets up your initial appointment, they'll ask you what inspections that you want to do. And
Right.
oftentimes as the agent I get asked, okay, which ones of these should I do? I
can't really advise you on that.
Can't really tell you. Now, commonly, I've never really had anybody that hasn't at least done the general inspection.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's to me a must. And commonly, radon and or the pest are the two other more common ones.
Right.
So I can't when you ask the question, I can't tell you which ones you should do. It's to your level of comfort. So if you see major cracks, in a foundation wall, or the walls bowing, maybe beyond the general, you should have a foundation inspection. Or if you're seeing tons of lead-based paint. Lead-based paint's a major issue, and that's another thing that you have an opportunity to inspect. So it's just your level of comfort, So your agent can't tell you. So I don't know what else to say about
Well,
that.
what I was going to add was that, and maybe you said it and I missed it, but these inspections not required. It's not required to be done. We highly recommend it.
Yeah.
This is not one of those things that I would skimp on. Right?
No, I wouldn't
And
either.
generally
Yeah.
speaking, when you're buying a house, this is where you're going to be living. You're going to be spending a lot of time here for a lot of years with you and your family and your friends. You want to make sure you're getting a good house. I don't remember what year, I think it was the 1980s, the movie The Money Pit. You don't want to close on your house and find out that it's got all these problems. I would not skimp on the inspection.
Yeah.
Now, you don't need to go hog wild necessarily if you're comfortable with just the general inspection, but I would always, when I'm buying a house at least, I'm always going to at least do the general
Yeah.
inspection.
And you can use whoever you want for that as well. We have people that we work with, and of course, always have names and numbers of people to call. But that's again, it's completely your call on that. But and sometimes I find people do pick it on
But yeah,
the
if you,
fee charge. So
if this is your third or fourth,
mhm.
you know, home purchase, you know, I find that those people typically have somebody in mind that they've used before and did a good
Yes.
job with them. But your agent, friends, family can also provide references, you know, when you need them. And then don't just rely on any of our words, you know, go check reviews on,
right.
you know, whatever service, you know, where you get your reviews. So go out, you know, do your own homework, find who you're comfortable with, if you're comfortable with the fees, and, you know, take it from there. So I think is a good way to approach it.
I had a client whose father was a contractor and had been for a couple decades, and she wanted to use him to do the inspection, and that was perfectly fine. And he had done them in the past and actually had a whole inspection report that he wrote up. In that instance, I think that because it was also a level of comfortability for their family, because they knew him and they trusted him.
So that's the key. I think the one thing he said in there is if you choose to have a contractor you have to have a report, because I've had some instances where you know, the buyer uses a contractor, but the contractor is not providing a written report. The written report's the important part here, because when you go to ask the seller to fix something, you need to show them something in writing from that inspector or whoever did the inspection of what the deficiency is.
Right.
And even more important is that if you're going to terminate the contract based on your inspection and you're still within the rights to do that in your contract, having that in writing as well. So, and from a qualified contractor. So, so in any case, you know, lots of things to discuss there, and that's a whole nother, you know,
That's a whole other one Wednesday. And we've talked about that too, having inspector come in and let us know if that would be of interest to you. I think it would be. I think it's interesting to know everything that they cover and different aspects of that and what can be inspected and not. So,
absolutely.
okay, so anything else with the buyer? Anything else cost-wise that you can think of?
Well, the last thing here I think is title company,
Yes.
and your title and recording fees. So, you know, based upon your real estate purchase contract, these fees are disclosed up front, really, who's going to pay for them. You know, your seller, by the standard Columbus Board of Realtors contract, is going to pay for the owner's title insurance policy, which is probably your biggest title expense once you get to that part of the transaction. These two will also be included in your estimated closing costs, and your good faith estimate that you get up in the beginning.
Right.
So this isn't something that, you know, immediately you're going to have to take money out of your pocket to pay for, but in the end, you know, and that's something else we should have put in this. Beyond the title company, you've got the government, you know, and TJ can tell you all about, you know, that.
We need to talk about some of the resources of government documents and where they are at some point.
Yeah.
We could do that.
So in that title company fees and estimates, you know, they're going to pay for you out of your settlement, you know, recording costs and transfers and deed fees and all those other things that come up in the course of a common, you know, real estate transaction. So what else do we have?
Well, a title company, there will be charges to both the seller and the buyer side. So that is something to be wary of as well. There are some fees that the buyer pays. There are going to be some fees that the seller pays. So that's how that ties in here. So let's, I guess, review.
Well,
sorry.
But one last thing on the title fees and the closing fees is remember that while we say that they're on the buyer's side, the seller may be covering a portion of those if that was in the contract. So if your negotiated price was $200,000 plus $2,000 in closing costs, while we say it's on the buyer's side, the seller may cover it. It just depends on what you negotiate in the contract.
Yes.
But that would have been done
So we can
way
discuss
before we got
that
to the
when we
closing
write a
table.
transaction. Right. you know, there's this caveat, I mean, you know, the typical transactions, there's going to be fees for the seller, there's going to be fees for the buyer, but there's always something, you know, we've all been doing this a long time, and it never fails that every single transaction something new comes up. So this is all very typical scenarios. With that being said, sometimes there will just be something out of left field that happens. So
Yeah, and it does happen regularly. So, so I think that is, you know, we've hit on all. Do we want to give a quick recap here? So,
sure, yeah.
Anybody who made it this far that missed anything? That,
Yeah. We can circle back around.
Yeah. So we've got buyers and buyer's agent, paid by
the seller.
and then we've got sellers and seller's agent, paid by
The seller.
Commission. That's
Commission.
The commission. That's
Commission,
the commission.
Yes, the
Yeah,
commission.
we've got.
yes, good
Yeah.
catch.
So again, when you're the seller, that commission that you're being charged typically gets split in half, or however, a portion
you
goes to the
negotiate.
buyer's agent, and then the other portion goes to the seller's agent. That's
Now, typically, if I'm a seller and I've negotiated a 6% commission to my agent, and there's no buyer's agent, am I going to save money as a buyer because they're going to reduce their commission?
Depends on the listing contract with the seller. But in most cases, if you go straight to the listing agent thinking you're going to sell you're going to save the 3%, that's not usually or often how it works. The selling agent's still probably going to get 6%, and they're going to get the full commission because that's their contract with the seller, unless something is renegotiated in the course of that. And
again, that could be another one Wednesday.
yeah.
There's like,
And we should be writing
we're
these
trying to
down.
be really high level here. So, yes, TJ.
Yes. So, all right. So then after that, we've got our lender,
Yes.
who's going to be paid
By the
in
buyer.
various ways by the buyer. We've got our inspector.
Also paid by the buyer.
Yes. The appraiser.
Paid by the buyer.
Yes.
Again.
And the title company, depending upon fees.
Paid by both.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And again, there's always, you know, like TJ had mentioned with closing costs, if the seller is going to pay a portion of those, it's usually the lender's fees, that's where that gets applied to. So that, again, you know, ask questions if this has been confusing.
Yes. Look at all of those likes. Someone is majorly liking.
Cheers.
Man, there's no
Happy
better
goal.
feeling than the
It
phones.
all happened at once.
Hey! Oh my gosh, that's
I know.
viral.
What is
Thumbs up,
happening?
hearts.
I think that's a Facebook mistake.
Something.
No, somebody is really.
Or do you
liking
all
your
just
wine.
like us that much?
Whatever
I think
happened,
that's
it was
what it
exciting.
is. Yeah,
Like,
that was
there were
pretty
thumbs
beautiful.
flying.
Can we see a heart?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody love us?
Yes.
Did we give us a heart? We feel like the 10 men over
We could
here.
we could just pretend we see one. Oh, there it goes! Woo!
Awesome. Oh, they're blowing up. Someone. in
What
the
is
middle.
happening?
It's exciting, and I can't help it.
But still no heart. It looks
I
like
don't-
it's the same person.
I don't know, Jenny, who is liking all your stuff?
Someone.
I think that's a Facebook mistake.
Okay. Well.
Anyway,
whoever
so-
it is, we love you.
Yeah, so don't forget, one drink for every like, yeah.
Oh, now they're trying to get us drunk.
Andrew, keep it coming. Is that, are you the one liking all this? Over and over again. Alright, yeah,
Yes,
oh!
yes.
Alright, that's 3, 4, 5.
Oh
Woo.
my god.
Alright,
We're out
let's
of
keep
wine. Alright, well, again, as always, we'll be back next Wednesday, 3 p.m.
going. Wait, let's add that this is the last time to be able to be entered into the raffle for Plenty of Cookies that will be given out next week.
Mhm.
So, any questions, comments, pending the comment, right?
Right.
I mean,
it's
It's
gotta be
gotta
real estate
question
related.
Real estate related,
Yeah.
please.
Although,
So,
is
and
Andrew entered in since he made us drink all that much?
we will end.
You win!
We will answer Andrew because we like to comment. So.
Yeah.
But
So-
go ahead and leave those, or send those to us. You still have a couple
Yeah.
days to
You
do
can private
that.
message if you don't want everyone to see it. You can text, call,
Right.
you know, whatever. And
Absolutely.
you know, if you are in the market or thinking about listing, always reach out anytime. We
Or
are
buying. So
real estate
Yeah.
agents and would be happy to help in any way we can.
that is our job. So.
Yes.
And then also, as we mentioned earlier, download the podcast. We will post it on the 43 Homes website, and then share on our social media channels here in just a little while.
Yeah, so
download
there's
the
actually, I'm sorry, there's gonna be two podcasts.
Yes.
We're gonna do one that my clever agent mate over here came up with the title, The Barrel Tasting. You're very clever. I love that.
Nailed it.
Yeah, so that's going to be just a little preview of what we're going to be covering for that Wine Wednesday. We recorded it yesterday. We could certainly do it a couple days before.
So the one we recorded yesterday was actually a preview for today.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
so you'll have the two about today. One's a short version and one's a long version. And then we may record, a short version for barrel tasting for next week.
Right. So and then we'll have, as we have stated, this is recording now, so this will be available
Very
immediately following. No
short.
pressure.
Or closer than that. Or close,
Later today.
Close. So thanks again for tuning
Cheers,
in.
everyone.
Cheers. See you
Have a
next
great
week.
afternoon. Thank you. I'll go shut off.
Peace.
Peace out.
Jenny out.
TJ not out. Well, I am.